Hello and welcome. It is me, Michael Short, Artistic Director at Blind Tiger Improv, located in the Hudson Valley, coming to you live on the internet with part 2 of my irregular series, Improv Q&A. So at the last episode, streamed here on Twitch, we talked a little bit about how people could find different ways to jive with their scene partner. I really suggest that you go back and take a watch of that one. There's lots of different tactics people can use. You can just focus in on some reaction, either to an invented emotion or just really paying attention to how you feel in response to what your scene partner is saying. You can repeat your first line to kind of ground yourself back into the scene. And you can make strong you are statements or I am statements, and those statements will be about whatever emotion you're getting from the other person or whatever you think you're feeling at that moment. These are all very simple things that you can do in an improv scene when you feel you're not jiving with your scene partner. Again, that was in the previous video. Go back and take a look. A little bit about myself for anyone who's wondering, who's come to this video and wonders who I am. I'm the artistic director here at Blind Tiger Improv. We're located in the Hudson Valley, New York. I've trained with a couple of different theaters over the past 2 decades now. I've trained with the Second City, I've trained with the Annoyance, with the UCB, and with the Magnet. And I say that mostly to tell you, anyone who's watching, that I pull from a lot of different sources, a lot of different influences, and a lot of different places have inspired me. I take little bits and pieces from all these different places, and I use them to help you, the person asking me for advice, become the more empowered improviser that you can be. Everyone has their own school of improv. I've got my own school of improv that's personal to me, what works for me. You may take something from me today that works for you, and you add that to your school of improv. The other reason I bring up the previous video is because I got an email a couple days later from someone who saw that video and had a couple of follow-up questions that they kind of wanted a bit of a deep dive in. And so I said, sure, I'll talk about it here on my Twitch stream, and maybe this will help you out. So they wrote to me via email, there's one person who I just can't seem to jive with, so thank you for doing that video. I've done several scenes with this person, and only one of them was remotely good. Okay, so again, go back, check out that video, see if there's any one of those things that can help you out. But let me ramble a little bit on something else that might be very useful for you. And it kind of tie into the second part of your email, which we'll get to in just a second. But sometimes when we're not jiving with a person, I think I said this in the other video, it's because we're trying to make something happen. We've got some idea that we're trying to push, that we're holding too tightly to. And by holding too tightly to it, we're kind of shutting ourselves off from other possibilities that are actually there. I'm going to give an example of something that happened to me, and maybe this will help you out. I was doing this improv exercise. This is a long time ago. And in this improv exercise, you are limited to one sentence. As in, you can speak all you want, but you can only say the same sentence over and over again. So an example might be, my sentence is, I like pie, right? For the rest of the scene, that's all I can say. I can only say the phrase, I like pie. And I can say it any different way that I want, but that's the only sentence I can say. And my scene partner also had the same kind of restriction. They had a different sentence, but they also could only speak that set of words for themselves throughout the scene. And I remember at one point in the scene, I was saying my phrase over and over again, trying to elicit a particular response from my scene partner. And he was repeating his phrase, and he was repeating it with very similar intonations. But I wanted him really badly to change it into something very specific. I don't even remember exactly what, I just remember the feeling of wanting him to change. And I couldn't. I could not get him to change for many reasons. One, I only had a short phrase at my disposal. I had not much else. I had other inflections that I could use, but it was mostly just an incredibly limited toolbox that I was working with. So I was never going to be able to get him to change that way. And the other reason I couldn't get him to change is because I cannot control other improvisers. I can't control my scene partner. I cannot control anyone else in the world, and definitely not anyone that I'm improvising with. And this is an important thing to remember. We as improvisers cannot make anyone else do or say anything. It's impossible. So by focusing so much on getting my partner to say this one phrase, by trying to control him, I was missing out on a lot. Similarly, with this person who you feel that you're not jiving with, you may be expecting them to do something for you. You may be wanting them to behave a certain way, whether that's in the scene as a character or overall as an improviser. You may want this from them, and they're not going to give it to you for whatever reason. Maybe there's a limitation. Maybe there's a skill set that's missing. I know that in my story, my scene partner was otherwise a fantastic, brilliant performer. And I knew that his choice to use the very same intonation over and over again was deliberate on his part. He was not trying to mess with me. He was not missing some other skill. It was a choice that he was making. Recognizing that he was going to continue to make his choice, and recognizing that I could not make him make another choice, I had to look inward. And in that moment, I allowed my character to be affected by this sort of emotional wall that he was hitting. Okay? I was getting the same reaction over and over again. That's a bit of an emotional wall. I recognized that my character was hitting one, and so I had to react to that. And, I'm sure in life, oftentimes we've talked to people and we don't get quite the response that we want, and that might make us feel something. It might make us feel, it might make us feel angry. It might make us feel sad. It might have some sort of effect on us. And so in an improv scene, we are allowed to and encouraged to tap into those kinds of real feelings. Understanding that I was not getting the same thing, that I was getting the same thing, that I was not getting what I wanted, my character began to feel sad. And opening myself up to that real possibility that was actually there, and not the possibility that I wanted that was never going to be there, the scene came alive. It still had that restriction, it still had that limitation of only one sentence, but it was much more vibrant and it was much more playful, and I had a lot more fun performing in that scene from that point forward. So, to sum up, if you feel you're not getting something from your scene partner, recognize that you cannot make them give it to you. And you have to look inward to yourself and see what you can change about yourself in order to have more fun with that improv scene. I'll leave you with one quick quote, excuse me, that I did not come up with myself, but you'll hear a lot of improvisers share this quote. It stems from this one brilliant performer and teacher who's based out of Chicago. Her name is Susan Messing. She has a quote she's been known to say, which is, "If you're not having fun, you're the asshole." That's a very direct way to say it, but it's true. You should be finding ways to have fun, and you should not be blaming others for your lack of fun. Find something that's fun for you to do. This kind of ties into the rest of your email, which we will now read. As for me, I want to be able to have an endless variety of characters that I can play. That's fantastic. We'll talk a little bit about what that can mean. So, just wondering, should I be owning in on one or two particular character traits and emotions until it becomes familiar enough to me, or should I just wing it every time and play around with anything that comes to mind? The latter is obviously more improvish, but the first seems more logical to me. Okay, so let's break this down a little bit. We'll kind of go backwards. The idea of how the first idea seems more logical to you. I would say, and again, this is all off the cuff. This is me just responding in real time to this thought, and of course, this not really being much of a back and forth conversation. I really can't ask you exactly what you mean by that, and which then suggests to me that you should challenge that notion. What does it mean when something sounds more logical to you? What is the appeal of the logic? What does that phrase and that word actually mean? And I would say it doesn't sound to me like it's more logical. It sounds to me like it's more comfortable. It sounds like it's safer. It's safer to have maybe a small handful of things that we can do that we know are at our disposal, and that we can just pick from one of those very small choices. And oftentimes in limitations do come creativity. That's why all sorts of odd poetry structures exist. But in improv, when it comes to scene work, when it comes to character work, there is a point where limitations are actually that. They are definitely limitations. They are definitely restricting you. They are definitely not pushing you into a place where you're truly improvising. And of course, I want to say this is all in the context of a straight up improv set, improv as a performance art form on its own. There are other uses of improv that I'm not really speaking to. This is just, we're doing an improv set. We're doing some short form games, or we're doing, a long form. We're doing a Harold. We're doing something that's just straight up improv. This is the context that we're talking about. So I think what you described about having one or two choices just sounds like it's safe to me. Like you kind of know what you're going to be doing going into a scene. And it's just a little easier maybe to pull from one of those two things. So let's go back. The latter is obviously more improv-ish. The latter being just wing it every time and play around with anything that comes to mind. So yeah, that's what I would like to do. That's what I like doing. But there are ways to make things come to mind that put you in a strong place. So what do I mean by that? Okay. Sometimes I think we as improvisers, we get told, well, you can do anything. And by being told that we can do anything, we then choose nothing, because it's difficult to answer a question that's not a specific question. It's like if I said to you right now, say any word at all. You here watching, you can answer that. You can try to answer that, but you may have thought of many words by the time that you actually say one out loud. And the reason is because there's no parameters to the question. And this is what we're talking about when we talk about limitations actually helping. If there's no parameters to the question, then any answer is correct. And if any answer is correct, then no answer really feels like the most correct. So it's very easy to judge all of our responses, wonder which one is the best one we can go with, and then maybe go with none. Or maybe we don't go with any answer at all because it's just hard and impossible to answer. There's just nothing to hold on to. So it's good to ask specific questions. And In regards to character development, in regards to starting a scene, um, there are a lot of different kinds of choices we can make, and so it's a good idea to use one of those as like the question that you ask yourself. The scene is about to start. What choice will I make for myself? Which choice do I like making? Which choice puts me in um, a very strong, empowered place? Uh, you can ask yourself, all right, what's an emotion I feel like playing with today? That's a much more specific question. I can answer that. I can pick that. Hey, I feel like playing with jealousy. That's an emotion. I want to do a scene where my character is jealous. We'll see what happens next. You can pick a point of view or a philosophy. You know, uh, a philosophy might be something like, "Hey, when life gives you lemons," right? We all know that phrase. That might be a phrase that just pops into your head, and you decide, you know what? Whatever happens in this scene, that's the point of view. That's the philosophy that I'm going to kind of filter it all through. Uh, Other things that we can do. We can also uh, we did this in the drop-in workshop over the week where we changed different parts of ourselves, and we did it by being given changes by other players. Other players did voices for us, or faces, or gestures, and so any one of those things can be something that you change in yourself. You can change your voice. All of a sudden, you have a different voice. What voice do I feel like playing with today? Do I feel like speeding it up? Do I feel like pitching it up? Do I feel like bringing it down low? Which voice do I feel like playing with today? And then letting that expand into a character. Do I want to turn my face into a mask? And let's see if I do something different with my face, does this change, my behavior? Does this change my outlook and the way I react to things? Okay, this is the seed of a character, or a gesture. Uh, is there something I can do? Like if I do finger guns all the time, this starts to become a bit more of a character. Little things that we can change. I'll reference another teacher who has a mnemonic that you can remember that might give you some ideas for things that you can bring in as specific choices for yourself. Her name is Jill Bernard. I think I may have referenced her in the previous video. I referenced her recently. She's great. She's out of Minneapolis. She's at the Huge Theater. Check out the Huge Theater if you're in the Twin Cities area. And check out her small, cute yellow book on improv. I believe that's the title. It's only $5. So look for that. It's great. It's not available on Amazon. I think it's available only directly through her. I'll look that up in a second. But in it, I guess I'm giving away a dollar worth of the book. But in it, she discusses VAPAPO, VAPAPO, and that is voice, attitude, posture, animal, prop, and obsession. And these are the different things that you can maybe latch on to. So voice, we discussed that. Attitude, that's kind of like the POV or the philosophy, very similar, or emotions, kind of same thing there. Physicality, the same thing with the mask, changing your face a little bit. Also, you can change your spine. You can give yourself a physical gesture. Changing your spine means, how do you stand? Do you slouch all the time? Are you very upright? These are different seeds of characters. Animal, if you start to embody the characteristics of an animal, so you might think to yourself a dog, and you're not going to run around and sniff people and pee on things, but rather you're going to start to think about what kind of characteristics you associate with a dog. So maybe loyalty and friendliness and playfulness, and these are kind of like going to be the personality traits that you just sort of assign to yourself by being inspired by an animal. Prop, we can do some object work, and we can make an object very important to us And that starts to again become the seed of a character. A good example that she uses is Groucho Marx with his cigar. We all know that, you know, every time he makes a little bit of a zinger, he, you know, I'm doing the miming right now, he moves his cigar in a particular way. So we start to communicate to the world through whatever miming that we're doing. And obsession, just, is there something that your character is obsessed with? Do they have some objective that they want to pursue? Is there something that's, you know, very important to them? Do they have some sort of motivation in life? Or is there just something that, you know, being comfortable might be an obsession, and they just always want to be comfortable, and so any room that they walk into, the first thing they're going to do is try to become comfortable, is an example. So they might come in, they might check out a chair, sit down, not good, they get up, they try another chair. I'm basically describing Goldilocks right now. So these are different things that you can use as a seed to your ideas, seeds to your characters, and one of them is going to ring more true to you than the others. And so that's going to be the question you start to ask yourself before a scene. Maybe when you hear the suggestion, how can you filter it through that one particular idea? Whatever that word is, how can I maybe translate that into a voice? And how does that now inspire the rest of my scene? If I hear the suggestion, how does that maybe turn into a prop that I can use? How does it change, make my posture change? Whatever it is. So ask yourself these very specific questions so that we are not going into an improv scene with no choice. We're not going into an improv scene completely neutral. We've got something for ourselves to do that puts us in a position of strength and allows us to play the rest of the scene. And you're asking, yeah, should I be honing in on one or two particular character traits and emotions until it becomes familiar enough to me? And I would say that sounds boring. And I know that's not a nice way to say it, but that's true. If I knew for myself as a player that I was going into an improv scene with only one of two things that I could do, very specifically, I would be bored very quickly. After a couple of scenes, after a couple of rounds of that, I'd be done. I'd have figured it out. I know what that choice is all about. I know what that character is. I know what that emotion is. I know what kind of scene it's going to lead to. And I've done it. I've got it figured out. And I don't really want to do that. And I also don't really want to play with that player. I don't want to go onto stage with someone else knowing that they're going to give me one of two things. That is just not fun. And I have gotten to the point in my career as a performer where, you know, like I said earlier, I recognized that I had to look inward. I can't control the other player. If that player who comes in with one of two things exists and they do it to me, it's not my job to get angry and pout about the improv scene. It's my job to play with it. And that's where, you know, something fun for myself is going to come into play. Making some interesting choice for myself is going to come into play in order to keep it alive and fresh and interesting for myself and for the audience. So, yeah. I don't want to see any performer making the same one or two choices over and over again. And you framed it in the context of it becoming familiar enough to you. And again, this kind of sounds a bit like a safety issue. It sounds a bit like, how do I put this? Like we don't know, maybe we feel we don't know the best way to portray any particular name your emotion here. And I would say you do know the best way to portray an emotion. You just need to tap into whatever is truthful for you. Um, if you look at the history of acting in um, late 1800s, early 1900s, there was a school of acting which was very ritualized. Again, this is, I'd have to look this up, uh, but there was a very ritualized school of acting where it's like, oh, here are the hand gestures that you must use that communicate whatever. Um, and so part of learning how to act was learning how to do these things. And so there was a correct way to portray sadness or happiness or what have you. And then, Stanislavski came along, and Meisner came along, and Strasberg came along, and all these acting teachers, and Spolin too, Viola Spolin, who we all descend from. These teachers came along and talked about, well, what if we access what we know? What if we access these actual ideas that we actually have as people and figure out how to use what's already inside of us? And, there are strengths to all of those ideas, and those ideas have evolved and changed over the past couple of decades. So, because it is important to note that there were some method acting techniques are not safe for people in the year of our Lord 2020. So just be aware of that. But point is, there is a way to access what you know, and to trust what you know, and to trust how you feel about things, and to trust that you can actually portray the correct portrayal. This is rambling. This is all unscripted. You can portray the correct way to read any emotion. If you act sad, it will read as sad. If you act angry, it will read as angry. People will get it. No one's going to be confused, I don't think. And if they are, then we can just say that we were working on a couple of different levels. But point is, trust yourself. Trust that you can access a way to show an emotion. It is familiar enough to you because it has happened to you. At some point, you felt everything to some degree. And also, if we are playing a particular character, they may communicate different emotions differently. If I'm a very peaceful character, and I'm very much at peace with the world, then how might the peaceful person communicate anger? Are they going to shout and stomp their feet and punch holes in walls? Probably not, right? The peaceful person displaying anger is very different from a very outwardly person. You know what I'm saying? So we're looking at ways to commit to certain ideas so that we can communicate that which we already know. If that's not a confusing statement. So yeah, remember those choices that we talked about before, the Vapopo choices, emotion, point of view, philosophy, any of these things. And think about the better skill to learn is to learn how to commit to the choice, how to hang on to the choice, whatever that choice that you made for yourself is. How do we hang on to it? How do we not let it drop? How do we let it inform us throughout the scene? How do we let it be a filter for all stimulus coming into us? How do we fight for that? How do we hang on to it? How do we hold on to that kind of idea, that very flexible idea, and thus communicate all sorts of ideas through that? So Great. And yeah, in that way, we will find that endless variety of characters to play. And one last thing, uh, if you find yourself playing the same characters over and over again, just be aware of that. Be aware of just how often you're doing kind of the same choices over and over again. There's usually not anything particularly wrong with it. You know, many improvisers have, you know, a few things that are just easily accessible to them, uh, that they go to very easily. If I want to do a gruff voice, I'm going to do a gruff voice in a particular way. If I want to do a deep voice, I have a, you know, it's very easy to access some of these choices. And so if you start to notice that you have these things that you're going to way too easily, put them to bed for a while. Consciously make a different choice. Sometimes go the exact opposite. If you're doing deep voice all the time, let's do a high voice. If you're doing gruff voice all the time, let's see how smooth you can be. Just like push yourself hard in the opposite direction. Be very conscious about it. And if later you come back to finding yourself needing to make a gruff voice character again for whatever reason, it's going to be a lot more fresh than it was when you were doing it every scene. So those are my thoughts on that email. Thank you so much for emailing that to me. If you're watching this and you think, hey, I've got some improv question I'd like a guy to expound upon for half an hour about, please, please, please email me at info@blindtigerimprov.com. That's info@blindtigerimprov.com. You can also check out our website, blindtigerimprov.com. We post, well, right now we post information about all of our online offerings because that's the world we live in at the moment. But in a few months, we'll be back to doing live shows and live classes. So if you're in the Hudson Valley area, keep an eye out for those. We'll be so happy to work with you. So that's at blindtigerimprov.com. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope that this gave you some food for thought. Maybe one of these ideas works for you. Maybe one of them will inspire you in a different way. Maybe one of them is an idea that you disagree with, and that's okay too, because that's how improv grows. This is all a discussion, and this is just these are just the thoughts that I have on this particular topic. I'd love to hear what you thought about this as well. So if you do have a disagreement, yeah, go ahead and email me. Maybe we'll do a Q&A about your idea as well. Thank you very much. Hope that you are all staying safe and healthy. That's it. I don't have an outro. All right, gang. Have a good rest of your day. Keep improvising.